time, we welcome you all to Disruptive Talks or Detox, our special virtual platform and virtual talk show where we invite dignitaries, we invite people from across the globe who are working on education, literacy, and achieving the global dream of literacy. Today, we have with us a very renowned personality and a seasoned education management and skill development consultant, Mr. Prashant Kakkar. Prashantji,
Hi.
welcome to Devi Sansthan. We welcome with all the respect and with all the gratitude that we have in us. We're really grateful to have you here. Before we move on, Prashantji, would you like to say something?
No, go ahead, please. Please. I think your take first.
So before we move on, it is of course formal and it is complimentary to introduce the dignitaries. And because there is so much to be said, so much to be told about Mr. Prashant, he is an entire package in himself with over 26 years of experience in K to 12 education management, skill development, and he is seen as a successful entrepreneur and a professional who has built his expertise in various dimensions like institutional, organizational setup, entrepreneurial ventures, K to 12 schools and their growth and management. Sustainable change and systemic change with regards to transformations in schools and in classrooms is something that is his expertise area. So that's something that we're going to talk about in our life today. More than that, governance and programmatic interventions and larger level L&D professional interventions is something that he's been involved in. All these years, all these 26 years, and that's actually more than how old I am myself. I'm literally 23. So that's a lot of experience on the table and a lot of expertise. So all this experience through all these years, he's been in various fields like marketing, branding, school strategies, and various programs where he has been handling operation models and management models for schools, including CSR related and corporate related interventions also. So Prashantji has also been developing expertise within CSR and corporates linked to education, and also skill development, large scale spendings through FCRA, unilateral, bilateral agencies, and multiple program metrics, and now emerging impact bonds and hybrid financing models. So more recently, he's also been associated with the Piramal Foundation or the Kevile Foundation as the project director. His early 13 years, which we're talking of 1996 to 2009, have enriched the foundational career in large multinational companies. So he's been primarily responsible for setting up businesses, which gives him so much of administrative and entrepreneurial experience that it's beyond measures. We are really grateful to have all that experience on Devi Sansthan and on our platform today. He's also been a member of the launch team of Indigo and Hutch, Indigo Airlines, that is, and Hutch in functions of marketing and brand management. And currently, he's associated, Mr. Prashant is associated as the senior advisory role with NASCOM Foundation in as a project management unit in programs team within BMFG and FCRA grant linked to the Niti Aayog. 30 aspirational districts towards digital and financial literacy to the community, and he's been working towards those 30 districts. And there's so much more to be talked about, there's so much more to be told, and I'm super glad and super grateful for Mr. Prashant to be here. Thank you so much, sir, for obliging us with your presence. Would you like to add something?
That's quite a long one at that. I thought it should be as crisp and short. I was hoping it should have been, but nonetheless, thanks so much for even having seen some value, and the value around who I am, where I come from. And thanks so much to Devi Sastan for having seen that and had given me this opportunity to come onto this platform. Thank you so much. That's all I can say at this stage.
Absolutely, it's our pleasure to host you. So, without a further ado, without much ado, we'd like to quickly start on the conversation, talking about the modern day education system, because literacy and education is something that Devi Sansthan focuses on. Prashantji, what do you think the modern education system has come to, and do you think it has changed over the years? How do you see this? How do you see this change happening around?
No, of course, clearly, I think that it goes without doubt in saying that over the last, about 6 decades, 6 to 7 decades of the Indian education and overall at a larger spec, the learning environments, I sense there's so much of growth, there's so much of transformational pieces being layered, one after the other, as educationists, as policymakers, as in their journey, as administrators who've been flowing this journey. You see, I mean, if I were to really pick other more systemic elements and layers of this change that's being brought about, it clearly technology, the fact that we are talking the way we are talking itself seems to be one great example of of the change and the innovation that the education system is bringing about. And I think basis on top of which there are so many other uh, 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 new age future skill led conversations happening within education skill development at large. You're looking at using this technology extension of this from a personalization context, from an adaptive context. I think those were things which were really not there in the past, right? I think those are clear cut changes and significant changes that are being brought about as we've moved in this journey that we have. Imagine having, we didn't even know what is called blended learning in the last in the yesteryears, and we've been able to now leverage some of that as we've grown. We've not even understood, or rather, we've just about starting to understand what is skill-based education, what is vocational education, what are livelihoods.
Indeed.
All of this in the realm of learning at the school level, at the youth level, at recognition of prior learning conversations, and so on and so forth, if you really ask me. And imagine, I would imagine even assessments as such has really seen so much of transformation, Ashutosh. So I think it's so nice to see these blocks of change, I would call it, Ashutosh. I would never have even heard of inclusivity at a more larger spec. I mean, that was not the case in the yesteryears. These are all clear signs of globalization. These are clear signs of how at least all of us as a society at a larger spec are able to really kind of see the evolution, see that change coming about in the landscape that we are currently working in. Does that make meaning to you, Ashutosh?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And when you mention that change coming from blended learning, or so to speak, from initiatives like peer learning, or basically moving away from rote learning, right? Because we've been conditioned and we've been told that, okay, rote learning is something that comes as the foundational principle for learning. I think what we're moving towards is more, as you correctly pointed out, that we're figuring out new ways of learning that is also skill based, that is also blended format, that is also peer learning. So just moving on from that direction onwards, and this is where we see the modern education system in this format, in this new format. Where do you place the onus of foundational literacy, specifically for children, specifically for people in the contemporary age? Because when we talk of a new format, we also talk of foundational learning becoming more and more intricate and more important, right?
Correct, correct. No, no. So, I mean, if you can help repeat that question in the context of what you're trying to put across, then maybe I'll be able to answer that. Uh, uh, yes, please go ahead.
In the sense of this foundational literacy becoming
Correct.
just more than rote learning, so not maybe teaching kids A for apple, B for ball, or C for cat, but more than that, sitting them with pairs, or sitting them in pairs and having this blended format of learning, showing them skills, or making them learn skills through a very young age itself. So that
So, no,
format, what are your
yeah,
views?
sorry. So now get the drift. Sorry to cut you short there.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get the drift of what you're trying to kind of
no worries. Yeah,
project for. What I sense here is that foundational literacy with the context of children. I mean, if I were to really be as acute as that, and specifically in the context of the modern age, in now, in the terms of now, I guess, and with the layering of what I just said in the past, with
correct.
respect blended learning, with respect to personalization, with skill-based learning, these are all pieces which are so very critical and crucial from you know. I don't think these dimensions were seen earlier in that light. The
Right,
light, when I look at it from a foundational literacy, if I were to layer it from what I've said earlier in the past, I, would it be seen as a gateway to learning? As as in, you really understand that maybe in the past that was not really seen to be in that light.
right,
Maybe we didn't even understand from the context of saying, hey, listen, is there something called digital literacy that would really build about in this whole
right.
in the whole conversation that we are really trying to layer, right? I don't think we've the modern age has allowed, and specifically in the foundational literacy context, look at it from a pure simple communication based skills, right? I mean, that by
Absolutely.
itself seems to be some major transformation being spoken of. So what I really understand from what my little experiences have been, it's also it's actually the FNL has become more or less a far more evolved subset
Right.
of this entire journey. If you really want to look at it that, imagine I wouldn't have heard of comments of critical thinking walking in a foundational literacy course earlier. But now everybody seems to be really focusing on those aspects. I don't think
Absolutely.
problem solving it's also been there in that journey of that student being traveling at the foundational literacy level. How am I even looking at empowerment for children? You know, how am I
Absolutely.
building agency? Which I thought was something very unique that has been now being spoken of in the FNL layer, right? And there's so many people working in that space, trying to layer all of these pieces into a learner at just the malleable age, if you really ask me. Uh, 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 it's building, many more facets of a human from a future ready conversations around, let's say, social emotional ethical learning, for example. I don't see that also being spoken of in the past. So I think it's interesting that how FNL has really uh, 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 been that subset where all of these are kind of being poured in, and aspects around, and the dimensions of this has been now starting to show
Right.
in the language, in the conversation, in the programs, and in the governance of all of these pieces as various entities, corporates, have now kind of made so much of so much of so much of sorry, I keep getting distracted with the kind of comments that walk in. So thanks so
Yeah,
much.
that's just our
But
audience showing
yeah, yeah.
our showing their excitement for the live stream, of course.
Correct.
We can come back to the comments later in the middle after some conversation.
Sure. So I thought, I hope that makes some meaning to what you were asking,
Yeah.
Prashant. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, when you mentioned foundational learning, also, and I think this reminds me of a lot what we do at Devi Sansthan as well, that
Mm-hmm.
we focus on FLN and literacy and numeracy as concepts which students can grab, which scholars or children can grab, not from possibly a bookish sense, or from a very conventional sense, but rather from actually questioning, or preparing to question or becoming curious for concepts like numeracy and literacy, right? So I think that also adds on to what we were just discussing with regards to the newer ways of education, or the newer ways of sort of implementing foundational literacy, right? And that
Clearly.
adds up. And don't you think that something like peer learning, when you and I are sitting in a pair and learning literacy and numeracy, don't you think that adds up better with regards to learning in place, or instead of just having a book in front of you and just cramming what's on your blackboard?
No, of course, profoundly, a big change happens when two people, two children meet. I mean,
Absolutely.
the peer learning with the basic learning principles and the dynamics around those two are so very embedded in the FNL conversation.
Absolutely.
There's no two questions about it, Ashutosh.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, moving on from foundational literacy now to skills, actually, because that's
Okay.
where also a lot of expertise and experience lies in this chat. Uh, while talking of educating this future that we're talking about, because we are depending on them, they are what we see in the future generations, right? Where do you place the onus or the importance of skill development in these children? Because it is something that is important, but it is also something that needs more attention. So,
So that's my favorite spot, if you really ask me. While FNL does whatever it does, and while middle
yeah,
school does whatever it does, and then therefore the higher school and higher education,
correct.
I think if you really, I see this in two dimensions. In 2D, in fact, 3D, for all I care. The idea is that education, more or less, at a larger spec, and FNL are the fundamental blocks in which this builds up. The It's to understand education at large is to understand who we are, where we come from. There's an introspection kind of a
Right.
journey. If you were to really look at it in that manner, for me, that's how I personally understood this space. It's got to understand and mold and kind of make decisions as to look at more on a more inward looking space. That's how I see these 12 years of our journey, if you really ask me.
Right.
When it comes to skill development, livelihoods, vocational education, it's actually a more outward led piece where you're able to then apply all that knowledge in finding, after you found yourself enough to find and start to apply it in more acute senses and the expertise that you hold. So
Right.
therefore, to me, it's a natural progression thereof, right? It's all it's all a long journey to find yourself from where you are, to make use of what that learning has been, and to make the use of who you are, right, and how you hold it
Absolutely.
yourself,
Right.
where you find your intrinsic strengths, and therefore being able to kind of apply through vocational education, through livelihoods, through skill development, those narrow areas in which, but narrow, I mean relatively narrow, but broad enough,
Yeah.
much broad enough, where lots and lots of changes are happening in that space as
Correct.
well. But I think that's how I see this journey between education to lifelong learning to skill development and vocational education, because that's where you make meaning for the community, for yourself first, and then to the community,
Absolutely.
right? I think in
Right.
that journey, does that make meaning to you?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Because when we talk of skill development as conceptual and a practical, initiative, in
Hmm.
both ways, in theory and practice, I think it starts from education. It grows from that idea and context of education itself. And I think skill development is something that happens across the board.
Good.
It's not that just, oh, you are in standard second to fifth and you'll learn a specific skill, or you're from sixth to eighth and you'll learn a specific skill. It keeps going on, because let's say if I'm, and I think I'd also like to sort of include in this vocational training and in this skill development, I'd also like to include like softer skills, like like your communications, like your the way you interact with the world, the way you present yourself through the world, etc., etc. Because I think these things keep growing on you. They don't essentially stop, or you never you never achieve that mission, because this mission keeps going on. So don't you think that this is always an ongoing process with regards to education as well, like skill development in relation to education? Don't you think it's an ongoing process?
Of course it is. Of course it is. It is. It is. Unless it's itself, I mean, it's got its own evolution on both those
Right, right,
two fundamentals, right? Uh,
right.
uh, uh, as you become more adaptive to the world outside, and you embrace new world, new technology. I mean, technology being the only cited example at this point in time,
Absolutely,
where that's
absolutely.
really impacted so much and will keep on impacting at a much greater speed and level
Right,
and quality as we go ahead. But that's the only example that one can really take at this stage to see how skill development within an arm of technology, AI, ML, and all of these others, which big language. Uh, it's just going to kind of transform the new age.
it keeps evolving, so to speak.
Correct. Correct. So that's a speedier change that's been seen, while at the school and the foundational literacy level, there's enough and ample amount of transformation happening there equally so. So I think
Absolutely.
they will keep growing in parallel as we move ahead. Uh, uh,
Absolutely.
hmm.
And I think with regards to this growth or this evolution, schools essentially play a major role. And as per your experience also, sir, you've worked in a lot of schools. You've worked across and around many educational institutions, so to speak. Uh, do you want to point out some major elements or some major features for our audiences that you thought in schools that needed change across these years? Maybe with regards to scale, or maybe with regards to foundational literacy. Any changes that you require or you think that are required?
Uh, uh, there are many. I mean, if you really see, there are so many places that the changes are already happening, and I mean, love to see even more of that happening, more of that happening.
Right.
With respect to what I just mentioned, I think the world is centered around, uh, 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 you know, at the core of it. If you keep the student first kind of a conversation, there are those layers which are immediate layers around curriculum, assessments, which are anyway seeing change and will continue to see change. That's my that's how the observation has been, right? To me, the assessment practices around that layer, to me, that's becoming an equally important piece to kind of look at. That's one side of the immediate. Next layer is essentially around teacher training, adaptive teacher, I would say need based teacher trainings, which otherwise generally has been just टीचर ट्रेनिंग करा लो, 10 लोगों को बिठा दो एक कमरे में, एक टीचर्स को, और वो ट्रेनिंग हो जाएगी, and
तो
they'll be
इससे अचीव क्या होता है प्रशांत जी?
correct.
What
No,
do you
that's what
think
I'm
इससे
trying to
अचीव
say, that
होगा?
look, those are evolutions that are anyway happening from 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 uh, uh, from where we are today, right? I think consciously, companies, consciously, people are veering towards saying, "Hey, listen, can it be more? Can it be more adaptive?" As what we do, adaptiveness with respect to student learning outcomes. What stops us from doing the same from a teacher learning layer, right?
Right.
To me, those are critical layers at the second level. At the third level, essentially, to me, Ashutosh, comes from this whole leverage of technology towards building curricula led changes, while of course also looking at it from a systemic governance led pieces. I think using leveraging technology towards building a much more sturdier foundation, a much more sturdier and efficient system. And system
Absolutely.
here is is not just school ecosystem. It's like it's a very complex one at that. But nonetheless, for so far as you can maximize technology to help build for management practices which have really not seen too much of a light. as far as education is concerned. Education, skill development, vocational training. I think I give it a broad brush. None of them.
Yes.
They're so they're so in they're so engulfed in transformation at at the student level, at the learner level, that some of those pieces get sidelined. So unless the and the moment they reach scale is when they start to make some noise around systems like change, right? I think that's how I see it. I see uh, uh, the conversations around flexible learning. Imagine MOOC was never a thought process earlier, right? And now
Right.
it's playing enough an ample amount of role, right? Self-paced learning, correct? So I think these are pieces which are anyway, that again, I hope I'm not swaying too much from
No,
what
no,
you're going to say.
absolutely. I mean, these are things that, in general, if you look at conventional schooling system, they don't as much look towards it because for conventional schooling, rather, and specifically in India, if we talk about that system, there is always this belief, and I mean, I still come from the, you know, the more recent schooling system. In the
Mhm.
more recent schooling system as well, this is a very sad reality that schools focus on not maybe adapting to skills or not maybe adapting to vocational training, but rather adapting to an approach where, okay, we just want a result to come out of it. We want marks to be scored out of it. We want our children, we want our students faces on the top shelf, on the batch toppers, and on the student.
99%. Well,
Absolutely.
it's very apparent, right? The
Yeah,
success matrix of a school is with the achievement levels and the achievement scores of the student. That's the only yardstick in which the success of a school has been defined.
absolutely.
And to me, that's the fallacy of this of the state, because
That
I think
that
that
is
it's linked to
because,
demand and supply
yeah,
conversations. Yeah, go ahead, please.
absolutely, because A, it links to demand and supply, and B, it also sort of promotes this competitive sense where
Correct.
kids are now not being prepared for something that's important, but something
Correct.
that's literally unnecessary. Because I don't want to top, I mean, I don't want to say, I don't want to aim for being the topper of the class. I rather would want to be a learned person or maybe a learned student, right?
Yeah, so I'll extend that conversation, and then I've been
Yeah,
using that as a storyline
please.
in multiple conversations that I've been having to school owners and school
Yeah.
principals. They've been very active conversations that I've had of this kind in the past. I don't see students being and the teaching learning, the teaching, forget the learning, or maybe to that respect, even the learning. Uh, uh, um, being geared towards being self-competitive. It's not about anything else.
Yes,
It's
yes,
about
yes.
building agency, as I mentioned in the past, about who how to better oneself. Right. I think in the light of how do you want to, and it's not a purist statement that I'm making. I'm making a statement out of sheer reason that if schools can today, it's not a utopian ask either, right? Where you can ask students to kind of build for uh, uh, and these are very core systemic pieces. How do you build for a better Prashant for every action that you take, right?
Exactly,
How are
exactly.
you how am I going to now fit myself better into a society?
Right,
How do I define my own goals, my own successes? uh,
right,
uh,
right,
uh,
right.
I mean, it's not to say that, well, I need to be some sadhu mahatma saint or somewhere. It's just that in the encompassment of making life, how do I become that self I mean, how do I define myself to be successful? I mean, these are my some more fundamental pieces. uh yeah,
Yeah.
clearly.
Uh, there are a lot of comments rolling in,
Correct.
about the idea of this self-competitiveness, or the idea of how these children in schools specifically are sort of conditioned to compete with themselves. Because I mean, sharing a personal example here, but I've always been in school, I was always the, the front bencher, so to speak,
Hmm.
the the student who's always, focused on with regards to, okay, you can top the class, Ashutosh, you can do this, you can make this happen. And even when I got my board results, for that matter, even till really late in like class 12 and everything, while exiting my school, even when I got my grades, I got somewhere around, I think, 92, 93%, which was anyway a great score. I feel today, I feel it's a great score given how
Sure.
long I've come. But in the school itself, I was so made to feel that, okay, you could have done better, maybe you could have reached that 95%, maybe you could have crossed that 95. And in the end, I feel like, okay, you gave me bookish percentages, you gave me percentages on paper, but the skill, the vocational training, or that relationship with myself as a student, that gets hampered. And I think it happens with a lot many students in schools, don't you think, Prashantji?
Absolutely. I can only but say that's so on the mark, right? I
Yeah,
think the students. I mean, again, these are not really utopian conversations. These are pieces which can, in their own ways, being incorporated into FNL, into middle school, into big school, into senior school. Should you choose to see the teaching learning in that way, I think that's the fundamental. I mean, there's no point really naming some of the schools that I have visited who seem to be trying to walk that path, and of course, this requires, these are small islands of excellence, as I can call it. Fitting such children into the big, larger society becomes a challenge. Uh, uh, uh,
absolutely.
I admit, but then I think there's always a start. That's what I believe, and that's what I see. Uh, 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 I know for sure my own personal experiences around this, in terms of some of my peers who've scored 99 at that time, 30 years back. Uh, uh, they defined their own success by sitting in a in a in a in a government setup, and running the show for large scale transformation changes.
Right.
So, I mean, they could have very well gone to the US and said, "Okay, Tata, bye bye, see you." But
that
you know,
that's
so
very
so
true.
I think you define your own measures of success. I think, I mean, that's how you see yourself. Yes, please.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are some comments rolling on in our
Mhm.
comment section on this idea of how results are compromised because of this self competitiveness, or the idea of how when you prepare students in school with this rote
Mhm.
learning concept or with this conventional concept, how there is a lot of compromise that happens because every teacher, wants to show their students that you are above the measuring line.
Correct.
You are above
Correct.
this average, that tag of average
That
student,
line, huh?
that
Zarur.
line that you can cross.
Correct.
Don't be
Correct.
below average, but always be above average. I think that's something
Correct.
that needs to be broken apart, right? That needs to
Absolutely, and I
be,
think those
yeah,
are those are sincere coaching, mentoring sessions that one really needs to, at least from a start. You can't make much unless you can do a systemic change, but at least I mean, this requires a larger systems-led view,
yeah,
where education administrators, policy, legal compliance, all of them have to really work towards building such a piece. But at least
absolutely,
to whatever degree that you can make a change in the school piece, is to really sit down with these teachers to kind of give them some more sustainable behavior led conversations, saying, hey, listen, in a school, in a class 30, you will always find a bell curve. I mean, you can never
absolutely.
find that all of them would be on above the
Above
metric,
average. Yeah,
above
yeah,
average. All of them would not be at that level, right? So you will,
yeah, yeah,
it's a principle, it's a fact of life that you will never change.
absolutely.
So how do you now start to build for that bell curve, and how do you make conscious and make meaning out of that bell curve that you have? It could be a more flatter bell curve, it could be a steeper one, I don't know. How do you see that as management practice, and how do you
Absolutely.
attempt to break that thing down into mini steps, micro steps, to say, hey, listen, these are my students, and that requires significant amount of work, homework, for the teacher, to build that at both ends of the spectrum, right?
Right.
So I think those are where I'm saying, suggesting technology, use of technology, use of governance, use of systems, use of conversations around assessments, which will help build this whole piece up.
Progressive changes, so to speak.
Correct,
Things
correct,
that
correct.
things that progress you over towards not maybe a negative loop, not maybe a negative feedback either, but like progress or growth, so to speak. Right.
Correct, correct.
Um,
So that's
one of the,
again from an external point of view, and of course, simultaneously also look at it from an intrinsic development conversations and see
absolutely.
how the student will make meaning out of wherever he or she is. I think that's the more important part. I mean, to me, it
Yeah,
has to
because
have a balance on both sides, where it's making meaning for the student to say, okay, I'm happy to where I am, and I would love to go into it. I mean, I choose my life in the next stage, uh,
right,
to whatever percentage I've got. I mean,
right.
yeah, that's my choice.
And
Uh,
I think as a system, it comes from outside, then it comes from within in the student, right?
correct,
Because until and unless the society at large or people, specifically teachers and your classmates for that matter, if they
correct,
don't start validating you as a student, not based on your results or not based on your scores, but based on what you know, what skills you sort of incur, or what vocational skills or what soft skills you know of. Let's say if I'm able to fix up a situation between two friends, and I'm not able to fix up a maths problem, I would not. I mean, I should not be judged on the basis of, oh, I don't know maths problem, but I should be validated on the fact that, oh, I know how to perform a certain skill, right? And I think that's something very important that comes from within after it comes from the outside, don't you think?
correct. I mean, there's nothing much to add to it. You've said it, Ashutosh.
Yeah.
That's yeah, yeah.
So, one of the comments that have come in is there's a slight discussion over the fact that how this self competition that we were talking about,
Mhm.
we've talked about it a lot, but
Mhm.
something that's very interesting to note is that beyond the schools and colleges, there is also this entity called coaching institutions
Yeah,
or tuition classes, which sort
correct.
of which promote this idea of self competition, so to speak. Where do you think that lies with regards to a student's journey through school specifically? Coaching institutes and how they promote this competition always, because it's always cutthroat, and we can agree on that. It's always promoted as something that's important.
So that's so just see, coaching institutions are to an end journey, end goal, right?
Right.
They're devising. I mean, they don't. It's just a simple business plan, yeah, that they have in mind. They don't have this very very egalitarian view saying, hey, no, 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 अपने को कुछ बनाना है. I mean, let
Yeah,
me make
yeah.
that child into something. No, it's about an end goal, end objective that you've been pressured. I mean, I would say negative or positive. I'm not putting any lenses to it. To saying, hey, listen, the child has to move a certain path, and I'm just being an instrument to help grow that person to that path and to the end goal. I think, to me, it's only an end. I think, if I can get your question and your comment there, the idea is that this could be taken care of at the school level itself. The coaching institutions are really not needed, if you really ask me.
Right.
But then there's something which is in the school system, which needs change, which will allow a more holistic, future-ready, whole child education kind of
Right.
conversation, to then uh, uh, come to come to a stage where coaching institutions are actually used for, uh, I don't know, some other conversation, but certainly not to make a whole child education, right? I think that's where the
Right.
change needs to be in the, and uh, uh, the coaching institutions don't, I mean, they don't talk anything other than very hardcore technical
Competitiveness rather, I think.
knowledge. That's about all that they do, right?
Yeah, because
They
this
meet.
ties back to this. this also dials back to what we were discussing earlier with regards to what changes are required in schools. Because I think once schools become empowered in this regard, when they start empowering students more than just, yeah, training them.
So yeah, so Ashutosh, if there are elements of critical thinking, there are elements of problem solving. Those are more. There are more not narrowed down conversations rather than a more outbound. I mean, more open-ended conversations and more
Absolutely.
context-setting conversations. I think in the school context,
Right.
you would not require coaching. Then it's just about adapting oneself as a learner into
Absolutely.
a competitive exam and then start to make
Absolutely.
meaning of the answers that you have. Uh,
Absolutely.
hmm?
Something that I'd like to also mention here, while we're talking of these new methods of teaching and new methods of learning, I think uh, Alpha, which is accelerating learning for all, and a
Hmm?
pedagogy developed by Dr. Sunita Gandhi at Devi Sansthan. I think what we
Okay,
focus on more so is this exact spectrum where we don't let the children think that there is a competition based on your scores or your marks, or something that you score on your tests. It's not based on that, but rather it's based on accelerated learning with regards to how you learn it better and how you question as a student. Because I
correct,
think that is something really important, Prashantji. I think we've also come to this conclusion in discussion that curiosity, to build that questionability, to build that curiosity within the child with regards to, oh, I can learn this, oh, I can also sort of go ahead with this. I think that's something that also pulls us out of the of the circle that we were just talking about with regards to competition, with regards to scores, with regards to marks. Don't you think that something
absolutely. No,
like
I've
that?
seen this. No, don't you worry. I've seen this grow significantly
Yeah,
from the time that I have been engaging in the school ecosystem, and how Mrs. Gandhi has been really working towards building and bringing in the right kind of noise and the right kind of transformation. Uh, 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 I think if I clearly remember, it was from the word go. I've been engaged in Lucknow, trying to seize her first setup of schools, and of course, I'm sure things would have evolved, things would have moved, and brought about more innovation as we've grown. But for sure, those thought processes are purely out of the intent of making a whole child education possible.
absolutely.
I know. I'm well aware. I'm well aware.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also focuses on skills, because when you talk of skills, or when we discuss of skills, children who are the contextual or basic receivers of this skill. Because say we are adults, we are people who can obviously condition them with skills, who can obviously make them learn skills. But it's the children at the end of the day who need to grasp, or as you said in the beginning as well, adapt to these skills, right? So talking of that spectrum of these children adapting to the skills, Prashantji, what do you think, what all skills uh, these children should learn or should be learning at the moment when they start with regards to numeracy or literacy? Can
Okay,
you think you want to underline some skills like that?
so skills could be around. Let me try and see if what comes top of mind. Of course, I'm not really. Let me try and answer this in terms of some of the core skills: social, emotional, ethical learning. Some of the skills should be around. I mean, should probably talk around global perspectives. To my mind, it should be talking about. Uh, 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 it should have the ability to look at a flexible learning environment where you've got uh, it should not be a hurried curricular based completion based piece where, hey, listen, I need to kind of finish it in 1 year, and I have that many lesson plans to complete, and therefore not really look at what the core concepts have been picked, not been picked, and so on and so forth. I think, to me, it's about environmental education. I think that's again something which needs, which could perhaps be a skill in a way that should be brought about. I mean, those are some of my core first thoughts from an FNL conversation. Does it make meaning to you?
Absolutely, it does. And more than this idea that you'll make them learn. Again, I would like to maintain that same thing only, that these skills are so important, as you mentioned, because social and critical thinking, cognitive skills, or so to speak, responsibilities. I think what this does is this gives them that progression, that upwards growth that we're talking about. Because as a country, as a developing country, not maybe as a developed country altogether, but as a third world developing country, I think that progression towards skill development is what is most necessary, don't you think? Because
Correct.
what we're lacking in a system like Indian education system is this idea that, oh, there's so much of focus on the textual knowledge or on the academic knowledge, but what we are not focusing on as such, maybe, or maybe focusing lesser on, is this idea is that, oh, skills are also important. So I think the
Correct.
skills that you noted down and you listed down are really foundational to bring that progression, to bring that growth into picture. Because
Correct.
once you make a child learn social and critical thinking, they start imagining the world around them in a more responsible manner, right?
Correct, correct, absolutely. And I think it all starts from, at least to me, what I see in the society at large, a general spec is that children are not seen as, I mean, children should be seen as adults and
Yeah,
forming adults and reaching that,
performing, progressing adults.
progressing adults, right? So I
Right.
think children are seen to be insignificant in the entire rung, and it's always a top-down approach where you're saying, hey, listen, children, I know more than you do, and therefore let me teach you as to how to run your life. I think that it's about building that agency. If that objective of building the agency for an adult, for an individual, is kept centerfold, and you place a child adjacent to it, things would start becoming very different attitudinally.
Right.
Things would start to see that at least he or she is building the agency for himself, herself, in the life that he or she has to lead. You've lived your life. Come on, give that other person a chance to live, and try and make meaning for her.
No,
You're
absolutely,
there to
absolutely,
facilitate that life, right? And you're
absolutely,
not there to teach that life. And I
absolutely.
think, to me, that's the fundamental on which programs should should surround, right? I mean,
They should be surrounded with such programs that
such
build on
such
this foundation.
correct,
Yes,
such fundamentals that otherwise you can see so many other, I mean, so many practical life examples, Ashutosh. I mean, I sometimes wonder, yeah, there's a teenage, and the teenage child is going, my daughter is walking by, and then somebody crosses the path and you bump into her. बच्चे ही तो है, बच्चे को लग गई तो क्या हुआ? I
yes,
mean, imagine. I mean, come on. You're a child. You've got an agency for yourself. You should. I mean, why look at it insignificantly, right? I mean,
right,
she's
right, right.
she's an individual herself. Or in the home, many a times you say, ये बच्चा है, इसको क्या पता?
Absolutely,
इसको तो कुछ नहीं पता होगा। मैंने, बच्चा इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि इसको पता नहीं होगा, उसको अपनी तरीके से पता है, एंड ही माइट और शी माइट बी एबल टू गिव यू अ बेटर पर्सपेक्टिव ऑफ योर ओन लाइफ देन व्हाट यू आर,
right,
बिकॉज़ यू आर एन hardened guy or a girl
right.
or a woman. So so yeah, so I see it in that manner. I see it that I mean, yeah, sorry. So yeah.
In that regard, I would like to add something here. As you mentioned that, kids do have, I mean, kids should be given their own perspective, or they should be grown with their own perspective with regards to having an agency, or having the agency to choose, having the agency to think, for that matter. Because it oftentimes happens whenever you come across kids, specifically kids aged, younger kids, not like, say, not maybe teenagers, but younger kids. that when you talk to them over certain topics, they give you such an interesting and such a different perspective on
Twist.
things
Correct.
that
Correct.
that you get surprised that okay, a kid said this, and there is something that's going on in their brain all the time which sort of
Correct.
needs this focus or sort of needs this shaping up. And I think
Absolutely.
programs like Alpha, I think programs like foundational learning, initiatives like skill development, initiatives like vocational training, I think those are some ways, don't you think, to develop this sort of brain and perspective within the child
Clearly,
since
those are
it's very young.
absolute tools, my friend. Those are absolute tools, Ashutosh. I don't see
Yeah,
that in any other manner than this. If they're designed in this manner, clearly there is no reason for you to sway away
absolutely.
from where you want to see 20 years hence, 30 years hence. How does that
Absolutely.
child, how does that adult, no longer a child,
Absolutely.
fits into a happy life?
Right.
That's the end goal, right?
Right.
And
Absolutely.
I see the ideas are more often than not snubbed at the school level.
Yeah.
Shut up and listen.
Yeah. 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 That
I
is
mean,
that is
it's
something
very
that needs to
there's,
change.
there's a very common practice of all teachers, largely. Again,
Yeah.
I'm generalizing it. There are no biases to it. Generally, that's been the practice in a private unaided school system. So much so, more so at a public education system level. Where
Right.
still things are still the evolution is still coming in. To me, that's a that's another challenge, another set of challenges sitting there. Uh, uh,
Absolutely.
but yes, to me, that's where it lies, Ashutosh. I hope.
Absolutely. I think that perspective building through these skills and these elements of schooling is something that we've agreed upon, and we largely also see this progressing towards that direction, because that is what we are building now. You know, empowering the country, empowering the society, empowering children, for that matter. We're almost reaching towards the end of this live session, so I'm going to just quickly fix up some concluding questions for you, Prashantji.
Mhm.
But before that, detouring a little bit, because it's been such an interesting conversation talking to you about all these things, that I want to know some of your personal experiences around the idea of skill development, or the idea of something that you've noticed, starkly, that made you think that, okay, this is why skill development is important for children.
So, good. You
Examples.
making me revisit some of my past entrepreneurial journey and
Absolutely.
what we did. We ran a company called EduSports, which ran in the context of making sports and using sports as a tool towards socio-emotional ethical learning. And it is a structured in-school program. And this is my past company that I set up, that we set
Right.
up. Sorry. And of course, I'm no longer attached to it, but I saw transformation taking shape, and Mrs. Gandhi would have been a witness to one of them.
Yeah.
But of course, I have not really closely gone into Lucknow many a time. I mean, not that I've not gone there, but I've seen it more closer here in Delhi, where I've been able to kind of get access to schools, school children. The program's been running, had been running for about 4 to 5 years. I saw that in that program, Ashutosh, I noticed earlier, and that was a sheer inquisitiveness. I knew of a remote connection to some 2, 3 children in a school, known through some networks, and I knew that those set of children were running our program and experiencing our program. They were backbenchers. They were not really vociferous guys. None of them were, and that transformation from where they were experiencing our program to where they have come out to be. I wouldn't say all the attributes of our program to be that transformative change makers, but nonetheless, what I heard from the teachers and from the coordinators and from the principal was that there was a certain amount of change that got brought about, and the transformation was as personal as that. I was really happy to see those 3, 4 children coming out to be to be exactly in the principles of what we've been talking of in the past, to try and build and help build their own decision making skills, their own critical thinking skills. And those are pieces that were not really as apparent in the other children, in what I have noticed. Does that make meaning to you,
Yes,
Ashok?
yes,
Huh?
absolutely. Because it always is said that oh, you can fix up a village, but to fix up that village, it takes at least two to three people to start, or two to three to four people to
Correct.
to start, or to so for that matter to fix up a school, or to to transform a school. It does take some teachers, some students, and some students who are dedicated to be curious, to adapt to that new environment of learning. And
Correct.
it is really inspiring with these examples that you give, because I'm sure that these students that you saw, even though there are 3 to 4 to 5 students, I'm sure that they are gaining curiosity, perspective, and also a lot of learning and a lot of skill throughout to become better
Absolutely.
individuals, right? uh, we have some comments boarding all across, and I hope you can also access those comments. And people, I mean, our audiences are really sort of mesmerized by the agency to the child, by the competitiveness that we've discussed. And there's a lot many things that there are also opinions on in the group chat, in the live chat. But before closing off this discussion, Prashantji, what would be your message to the coming generations, or to the generation or the crowd of students that you see across
Hey,
at
listen. Yeah, no. So I've seen. I think we've been speaking all about what we've been,
right,
what change we'd like to see, right? I mean, for whatever little white hair that one has really collected over X amount of years. I can only but appreciate. I can only but say that, look, it will allow. It will. I can only but wish that more of uh, 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 more of uh, a sense of learning to learn is something that I believe as a skill that we should be holding on to, because as adults we harden ourselves
right,
too much. I think if one such quality gets embedded in each one of us, I think, uh, uh, not that again I'm saying it's not the only solution, but I'm saying it's one little piece of change that one can really see if you can build for that ability to learn, and not block ourselves, because I think learning brings change, and change is very hard to take on and to adopt, right? And it's very hard because so you're so hardened by you're it could come by your own comfort zone. It could come from the fact that you're comfortable in that zone, don't need to change. Why do you see a reason to change? But I think those are principles on which, if you can attempt to make some impact, I think
absolutely.
it should it should be a long mile ahead. Yeah.
Absolutely, it is a long mile ahead, and I think as professionals from that field, as people working towards literacy and towards education, towards foundational learning for that matter, towards skill development, and towards all the elements that we've talked about so far in this live session, I think as people who are agents to have that functionality happening, I think it comes on us also as a responsible individual to act upon those and give perspective to children, make them learn these skills, make them learn these important vocational elements where you're talking about, okay, get better at this, get better at that. So I think my personal message, or to everybody watching this live, to everybody who's going to access this, and I think Prashantji is going to agree on that as well, that my message to all of them would be that do not run behind grades, or do not run behind, fixing up a percentage for yourself to prove that you're validated, or to prove that you're worthy enough of good learning. I think once you develop that skill, once you develop that social and mental capability to set your own perspectives and become responsible for yourself, I think you've achieved it, my friend. And that's, I think, don't you think, Dushanji, that that's something that
Absolutely. Completely, Ashutosh. Yeah, that's superbly well said. Thanks so much, Ashutosh.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for joining on this amazing live, and thank you so much, Mr. Prashant, for being here, being with us, obliging us with this opportunity. I hope you had a great time talking to us and interacting with all our audiences at Devi Sansthan.
Lovely. I mean, I think, as I mentioned in the beginning itself, thank you so much for even having seen some sense of value in me to have called me over for this conversation. Thank you, and thanks to
Thank
Mrs.
you.
Gandhi, for sure. Without which, I don't think we would be where we are today.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Absolutely. So, thank you all for joining. Keep watching Disruptive Talks with us. This is Ashutosh signing off for today. Bye bye and have a good
Bye.
day.